水先染上一河鲜血，只能如铁锈般凋零。
Horror games. A genre that's well known for both its cheap and formulaic designs, full of schlocky jump scares and regurgitated mechanics, as well as a genre rife with some of the best offerings that gaming has ever created. With emotional and impactful stories that both stand the test of time and continue to be thought-provoking and challenging to this very day. Whether it be the 50th Five Nights at Fuckboys spin-off or a brutal but captivating classic such as Fatal Frame, the bottom line here is that it's a genre rich of experiences unlike any other, with a plethora of titles and series to play through, each offering something different to the player. But when you think of horror games, what do you really think of? Probably big mansions full of zombies, haunted towns covered in fog, maybe some animatronics out to snuff you, or maybe even some parasitic aliens seeking to ravage your body into their own vessel. While each of these is pretty terrifying in their own way, the sad truth is that they each pale in comparison to true horror. Those being what can be found in history.
A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy.
The human race across the globe has been subject to bouts of history more dread-inducing and awful than any piece of fiction. Whether it be the harrowing era of the Black Plague, the violent trench warfare of World War I, Germany's Angel of Death, Joseph Mengele, and his depraved experiments. It's all just a bitter pill to swallow. But that's it. Humanity can be absolutely devastating to its fellow man if the circumstances allow for it, especially when an oppressive regime enters that mix. One would only need to look at the Spanish Inquisition, the German siege of Europe, the fall of Rhodesia, or in our case today, the 20th century of Chinese history. More specifically, the bitter feud between Mao Zedong and Chiang Kai-shek, a rivalry that would lead to countless deaths, paranoia, and cracks so deep in society, they have left scars that can still be felt more than half a century later. This is why books such as George Orwell's 1984 or Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 are listed as novels more horrifying than what you could ever find in the bibliography of someone like Stephen King. The horror of genuine oppression and tyranny, and the loss of trust between us and our fellow citizens, is a fear that is far more real and far more human than any monster, ghost, or serial killer could ever embody. So, dear viewer, you might be asking yourself, what does any of this have to do with horror games? And hey, that is a fair question. But the simple answer here is the little-known Taiwanese game known as Detention. Detention is a 2017 point-and-click adventure game by the independent studio Red Candle Games, a studio best known for their second offering, Devotion, a game that was banned in China and most major online retailers for its less than favorable depiction of CCP leader Xi Jinping, because in no way does he resemble the likes of an animated yellow bear with a voracious appetite for honey. Detention was Red Candle's first outing, and what is presented is a masterpiece of psychological horror, as well as a period piece of Taiwanese war history that pushes beyond its humble bounds as a simple point-and-click adventure game and into the bounds of something that is life-changing and touching beyond belief. So hey, instead of yammering on, why don't we just talk about it? Let's journey through the horrifying tale of Detention and see just what waits for us in the haunted grounds of Greenwood High School. The game starts off simple enough. A boy in a classroom watching as his teacher is asked to step out, all just to speak to a higher-ranking instructor about a simple list of books. As the boy nods off, time passes and he reawakes, realizing that he's been asleep for a little too long and needs to get home before a scheduled typhoon hits the school. The classroom is dark and empty. Not threatening, but a little uncomfortable. The way any space created to house large groups feels when you're all alone in them. As we guide our protagonists around the lonely school grounds, things start to feel more off. Nothing outwardly wrong, but something in the air is just different. A feeling as if something is lingering in the shadows. We quickly come across a note containing a drawing of a large tree with a person standing beneath it. Strange, but nothing out of the ordinary for a school. Although, as we continue to trek across the grounds, there is a clear void in the atmosphere, with not just the everlasting emptiness of the environment, but even the planters on the classroom walls being vacant, sparse of life aside from a single daffodil. And when picked up, we meet yet another note. This one containing a burnt picture, with writing over it that says, "The roots below the earth claim no rewards for making the branches fruitful." A bit of a somber quote, but fitting for a somber atmosphere. The more we explore, the more things just start to look wrong. And as we step into a maintenance room, we see something that appears to be a body. though thankfully it ends up just being a large coat. As we make our way from the classrooms, we walk down a scenic view, enjoying the calm before the storm both figuratively and literally. As the sky glows out, illuminating rays. But it's as we enter the theater where we meet something unexpected. A girl, asleep and alone on the stage. As we approach her, she awakes, unaware of where she is and just why she's there. Our player character, Wei, introduces himself and explains the situation to her. A typhoon is approaching and they need to leave as soon as possible. She proceeds to tell Wei about her necklace, one she lost, and requests us to find it before they depart. And reluctantly, Wei does so. As we look around, we come across a fan vent, where somehow the necklace has fallen behind it. And this leads to our first bit of actual tension. Sticking an arm into an obvious trap is a classic trope of horror, and one begging for us to fall in for a good scare. But Detention sets its first play aside, showing restraint, showing its hand at overting expectations. We end up finding an umbrella and using that to grab the necklace, preventing the obvious amputation that we would expect from a less subtle experience, reinforcing to us that Detention is playing above the typical horror rules, and likes to let us stew in its tension rather than simply shock us upon every opportunity. Upon returning the necklace to the girl, we continue our resolve to leave the school before the storm fully hits and night falls. But as we leave the theater, we see that same tree depicted from the sketch, though no figure awaits beneath it. The tree stands tall in its magnificence, and it's here where we can really take in the beauty of the game's presentation. The black and white characters contrasted against pale and pastel colors illuminating from the sky above. As we make it to the end of the trail leading off the mountain, we're met with a horrible sight. The bridge is broken, leaving our characters stranded, as a sea of crimson flows harshly beneath us. Though we as the player already know it's a sea of blood, our characters rationalize it away before they head back to seek shelter in the school. Back in the classroom, we finally learn this mystery girl's name, Fang Rei Shin, Wei's upperclassman. The two converse about their school while lamenting the situation they're in, a comforting friendliness to appease the peril of the weather just outside. They speak of their teacher, Miss Yin, though this quickly devolves into speaking about another figure from their school, the feared instructor Bai, someone who is infamous for the rumors about his savagery during the war. Wei expresses his fear of Instructor Bai, while Rei mockingly mimics him and his overbearing nature of accusing those who fear him of being commies. The conversation ends as Wei resolves to get to the principal's office to try and use the phone to contact help, as well as gather some supplies for their stay in the school overnight. But upon leaving the classroom, the world around Wei changes. No longer is it the familiar yet empty place he once knew, but now it's torn and distorted, black and white and ghastly, as if leaving the classroom left him in a purgatory. And as he takes his first few steps away from safety, the screen fades, and then as the screen fades back, Rhea rises from the chair that she sits in, back in the theater, with Wei hanging behind her, eyes closed and stiff, swaying side to side. Rhea gazes in horror of the situation she's awoken to. Taking his notebook, she opens to a page containing a fortune-telling poem. Turn the wheel with the laws of the universe to reveal the path ahead. Its cryptic wisdom eludes us as the player, especially as we explore our surroundings, attempting to figure out just what's going on, eventually entering the same room that Wei found Ray's necklace. Though no jewelry awaits us in the vent this time. In its place is now a dead rat, a bad omen for what's to come. We make our way outside, only to see the beautiful tree, now standing as a haunting and oppressive specter. And in place of the trail that once sat beside it, now rests a gravestone. And just a few steps away from that, a shrine. As we inspect it, we find a key, yet another note. One telling us of spirits known as the Lingered, corpse-like demons who roam. Our only way to avoid them is to hold our breath. And as we walk away from the shrine, we come face to face with one for the first time, meeting our tormentors. Okay, let's just take a minute to digest what we experienced, because that was a lot. Detention is a game that plays on your expectations, while subverting them and playing directly into them in order to really create an unstable atmosphere. You never know just what's to be expected in your journey through the haunted school. And while up to this point it's mostly played with its atmosphere to mess with you, it is here where we're introduced to the main enemies of the game, the ever-creepy Lingered. The Lingered are based off of the Chinese folklore spirits known as the Wanglang. Now, this is a bit of an umbrella term for quite a few different malevolent Chinese spirits, but they are typically man-eaters, and their overall behavior and appearance changes depending on which depiction you're reading about. Even just on the surface level from the Wikipedia page of all things, it lists plenty of variations such as the Guoyu, Zuzhan, Chuqi, and Shuangxi. Though I think here the depiction that hits closest to home is the Chuqi, a poetic variation that means feeling absent-minded and baseless. My fainting soul shrank back, oppressed, and as I lay, mouthful of water, deep below the surface, the light of the sun seemed dim and very far above me. Mourning for its body, dissolved now by decay, my unhoused spirit drifted, disconsolate. Now, I find this fitting in a few different ways. One is a lot of thematic reasons that we'll get into later as we delve deeper into the game's story, But the other reason is because the Lingered in this game are more or less aimless, wandering in basic patterns as they populate the empty dwellings of the school grounds, awaiting a human to come and close and serve as their dinner. And as the game goes on, we are introduced to further variations of these creatures, such as the tall, menacing figures who freely roam and, if encountered, also require us to hold our breath to evade detection, lest we become a victim to their hunger. And while these enemies can be foreboding, they're relatively simple mechanically. All we need to do is hold our breath and evade detection, and in some situations offer a food offering to keep them distracted as we sneak away. Though these entities aren't the only things we have to fear during the game, but we'll get there when we get there. The environment will also change as the game progresses, becoming more supernatural in nature with its pathways shifting and changing, and more areas of the school becoming decrepit and rotted, blocking pathways and covering doors, forcing us to find tools to pass through and find alternate pathways to different areas. And if this all sounds familiar, well, it really should be by this point, because this is the classic survival horror format, simply translated into a point-and-click adventure game format, just ditching the combat aspects. Now, this is where a lot of people tend to do this game a huge disservice and call it a Silent Hill clone, or unfairly compare it to the series in general. And while there is some obvious influence being taken from Silent Hill, Detention really is its own thing. It's just another game that takes Asian horror sensibilities and uses that very distinct approach to its gameplay. Asian horror in general is very different from what we can find here in the West, as it tends to rely more on the sense of terror rather than solely using horror itself. Now, if that sounds like a redundancy, maybe I should define my definitions here. Terror, a state of intense or overwhelming fear. Violence or the threat of violence used as a weapon of intimidation or coercion. Horror, painful and intense fear, dread, or dismay. The quality of inspiring horror, repulsion, horrible, or dismal quality or character. The two are similar but differ in very important ways. In essence, terror is overwhelming and comes from intimidation and the perception of a threat, while horror is more so a state of dread and dismay, a repulsion or pain. To take this a step further and make it even more simple, terror is the precursor, horror is the result. The two go hand in hand, but are important to define when describing how a piece of media induces fear. For example, when describing something like The Witch's House, it would mostly be a game that plays on horror, jump scaring you and letting you see the horrifying result of said jump scare, leaving you anxious and repulsed at what you experienced, inducing dread into the player. Where, to use a different game, Siren relies more on terror. The main horror of that game being the constant threat of danger, seeing yourself through the eyes of the Shibito, and feeling overwhelming fear as you try to evade interacting with them at all. In the case of Detention, it uses the classic approach that can be found in most East Asian horror, which is a combination of the two. A horrifying atmosphere that induces dread and repulsion from the player, while using the terror of what lurks in that atmosphere, what's hiding in the dark, to heighten the fear and intensity, creating an almost exhausting level of fear and dread in the player. Sun Yat-sen, the father of the Chinese Republic, revered by both the communists and nationalists alike. Dr. Sun paved the way for a modern China, rooted in three principles of the people: nationalism, democracy, welfare. Sun Yat-sen founded the Tongmenghui, a predecessor group to the Kuomintang, a revolutionary Republican group dedicated to overthrow the Manchu Qing dynasty. The Wukong uprising kicked off, resulting in the Shihai Revolution and the dethroning of the child emperor Puyi. Dr. Sun acquiesced to the demands of Yuan Shikai, resigning as president of the Republic of China and giving that role to Yuan. The Republic of China would hold elections in 1912, with the KMT winning in a majority of seats. Song Shio-ren, a prospective prime minister, would be assassinated by a gunman, suspected to be under Shikuai's orders. Dr. Sun would retaliate in 1913, leading a large-scale revolt, though in the end the rebellion would end up being crushed, and Dr. Sun would be sent to exile in Japan. Shikuai would revel in his victory, restructuring the provincial system of China to give military administrators their own personal armies, a mistake that would come back to bite everyone. Shikuai would later declare himself emperor, much to the chagrin of the populace. Though Shikuai resigned and then laid the foundation of China's devolution into a period called the Warlord Era, from which two very special individuals would emerge. Re-entering the school grounds, we guide Ray around trying to figure out just where we can and can't go, trying to find our way out of the school. Though the more we explore, the more we see that the environment has just continued to shift and change, and more Lingered are showing up to take residence. But it's as we explore further that we hear a ringing. And upon entering the principal's office, we find its source: a phone. And so that's our goal. Make it to the counselor's office. From here, we guide Ray through the school, hunting for supplies and clues that can help us find the counselor's room. As we do, we find more notes, giving us further information on just what kind of society that we are existing in. Notes about gambling being prohibited, and more instructions being left on how to avoid the Lingered. But it's as we continue on that Ray's mental state begins to uncoil. Becoming even more guilt-ridden and unstable. And as she falls deeper into her mental abyss, the world around her just continues to twist and distort. As we try to make our way to new areas, we just continue to find locked doors and blocked pathways, until we eventually reach a gate with a padded lock on it. The only problem is we have no idea what the proper combination is. So Ray continues searching. And as she does, she continually comes across gambling dice. Prohibited items scattered across the school. In one of the classrooms, we also come across an oddly scarred desk, appearing as if something is engraved in it. Though with the lighting and damage on the wood, it's a bit impossible to decipher. Though it is clear that there is something important written here. We eventually wander into what is possibly the nurse's office, where we find a key hidden behind an eye test. And notes regarding mysterious injuries reported on students. The only abnormality is that these injuries are severe, and even the nurse who wrote is asking how such injuries could be sustained at a school. But that's the thing. The more we explore the school, the more signs of abuse become apparent. From the injuries that could obviously be signs of foul play from staff, to smaller, more humiliation-based abuses, like posting a student's bad grades publicly for all to see and to mock. And through this, we also find more and more contraband items like the dice, and it only furthers this line of thinking. Eventually, we come across a door that's blocked by Taoist talismans, and using some cleaner, we find that we're able to remove them. Upon entering, we find ourselves in the office of Mr. Cow, and the inside looks decrepit, with a sharp knife sticking out of his desk, and upon inspection, shows to have been repeatedly stabbed. But this room isn't the only one here, as we make our way to the connected storage room. An even mustier and more disgusting area, housing a single table with a bucket, a bottle of liquor, and a lone bowl atop the table. As we inspect the bucket, we find our third die, as well as some indescribably awful things. But with that, it's clear what this room is for. A hidden spot for Mr. Cow and his company to gamble, hidden from the threat of the prying eyes of authority. And just for the sake of it, or shits and giggles, we toss our collection of dice into the bowl. And upon doing so, it happens. A realization that those dice were never really dice at all. They were human teeth. Though Ray swears they were dice just a second ago. And that's when it dawns on us. A question. Is Ray just going crazy? Or is the school actually haunted? And this question only becomes more apparent as the deeper we get, the harder it is to answer. And it leaves us as the player even deeper in a sense of confusion. It's when we leave this room where things take an even darker turn. Not only have we brought the bowl with us, but in Mr. Cow's office now lies a note that wasn't there before. And this one is, not very comforting. It's a demand for sacrifice, a call for the blood of the innocent, and a call we are obviously being hailed to provide, no matter how much we wish not to. Ray makes her way back to the auditorium and places the bowl underneath Way's lifeless body. And as we take the rusty knife we got from Mr. Cow's office, we proceed to slit his throat, draining his innocent blood to feed the thirsty beast. If it hasn't become clear yet, the game's environment is twisting and distorting to personally reflect that of our protagonist. From a paper that Ray wrote being posted on a bulletin, to the shattered mirror as she laments her situation in the bathroom. Everything seems to be distorting around her, and specifically calling to her in many different ways. What's also at play here is some Eastern religion or philosophy, depending on how you want to look at it. Those being Taoism, or otherwise known as Taoism. Hence the talismans painted across Mr. Cow's door, and the fact that our save points are actually Taoist altars. And understanding a little bit of the basics of Taoism is a bit crucial to understanding its symbolism in the story. The term Tao means a road, and is often translated as the way. This is because sometimes Tao is used as a nominative, that is, the Tao, and other times it's used as a verb. Tao is the process of reality itself, the way things come together while still transforming. All this reflects the deep-seated Chinese belief that change is the most basic character of things. In the Yi Jing, the classic of change, the patterns of this change are symbolized by figures standing for 64 relations of correlative forces and known as the hexagrams. Tao is the alteration of these forces, most often simply stated as yin and yang. The Qixi is a commentary on the Yi Jing, formed in the same period as the DDJ. It takes the Taji, Great Ultimate, as the source of correlative change and associates it with the Tao. The contrast is not between what things are, or that something is or is not, but between chaos and the way reality is reordering. Yet, reality is not ordering into one unified whole. It is the 10,000 things. This is the Tao, but not the world or the cosmos in a Western sense. To put it simply, it is the yin and the yang, finding harmony between yourself and the way of the universe, or in this case, the Tao. As Rei struggles with the chaos of the distorted world around her, she also struggles to accept herself and her role within it throughout the game, either being in complete denial of what role she plays, or just ignorant to why she is in the predicament that she finds herself in. Though the symbolism also goes a bit deeper here, as we've observed the less accommodating and friendly leadership of the school, which is possibly symptomatic of the game the world takes place in as a whole. Among the most controversial teachings in the DDJ are those directly associated with rulers. Recent scholarship is moving toward a consensus that the persons who developed and collected the teachings of the DDJ played some role in advising civil administration, but they may also have been practitioners of ritual arts and what we would call religious rites. Be that as it may, many of the amorphisms directed toward rulers in the DDJ seem puzzling at first sight. According to the DDJ, the proper ruler keeps the people without knowledge, fills their bellies, opens their hearts, and empties them of desires. Like King Arthur returning from Avalon to save Britain when it needed him most, Dr. Sun returned to China, splintered by mismanagement and corruption. The Kuomintang established themselves in the south of China, in the beautiful city of Guangdong. The KMT established a parallel government from Beiyang in the north. Sun Yat-sen accepted Soviet aid in exchange for forming the first united front with the Chinese Communist Party. The Wampa Academy, China's first army school, founded by, would be instrumental in defending Sun's ideas through martial force. Dr. Sun relied heavily on the Soviets, sending KMT apparatchiks to be trained in Moscow. However, Dr. Sun was growing sicker, and as he took his final breath, the Kuomintang's power vacuumed presented an opportunity. The heir for the Chinese Republic would be fought between Wuhan's Wang Jingwei and Nanqing's Chiang Kai-shek. The Nanqing Generalissimo stood triumphant over the Wuhan Revolutionary. Meanwhile, the National Revolutionary Army would march on Beijing to drive the Beiyang snakes back into Manchuria. The Generalissimo did the unthinkable, uniting China under the iron fist of the KMT. He maneuvered through his political rivals, sending them to exile. The First United Front was going to flourish. No, there can only be one sun in the sky. Kuomintang forces marched into Shanghai and butchered communists. Beheadings in the streets, gunshots crack out. Cue the communist uprisings, cue the encirclement campaigns. One lone school teacher from Hunan took the mantle of leading thousands of communists through enemy territory and into the heart of northern China. The Japanese watched with glee as China grew ripe for the taking. In 1931, the Japanese Kwantung Army invaded Manchuria under the pretense of a false flag incident in Muddied, where they restored Puyi to the throne of the Manchurian puppet state. And in 1937, China would face one of the bloodiest conflicts in human history. It's at this point where the game really ramps up. We take our fresh bowl of innocent blood back to the classroom and splash it over the engraved desk. Using a page from our notes to see just what it says. And we're given a list of numerals, resembling that of the padlock. And if we venture back and use those numbers that we got from the roll of teeth that we did, it unlocks and Rei enters a new area of the school. But upon her first few steps into this new area, we enter a save room. And one that shows that, despite your brief respite, things are only getting worse. And after a brief bit of exploration, a new obstacle approaches. A giant, multi-armed monstrosity gangs on us, nearly outpacing Rei as she runs out of breath to escape. And just when we think that she's found safety, we enter a room almost as ominous as the monster outside of it. It's in this room where we also find the partial remains of someone's counseling record, one that depicts a troubled delinquent, someone resembling a character that we know. And as we close our notebook, we are in Rei's room, surrounded by the sound of her parents fighting, as she laments her life situation. And in the trash, we discover another photo. One depicting a desire to maintain hope, no matter how bad things get. A message even Rei's mother wants to forget. As she once again awakens from her slumber, it appears that Rei is back in the theater. Though after a quick glance, we find that we're outside. on the other end of the school grounds, the Crimson River still blocking our path to freedom. As Ray re-enters the school, she's met with only further dismay from its empty and contorted form. As she explores across, she finds a door depicting two men, though they're missing their tools. And if we take a look at a note near the door, we can find out just who they are. Haibei Wukong, ancient officials who are now messengers of death, collectors of souls for those who pass away. And like the dead rat before, this appears to be yet another bad omen for what's to come. And speaking of bad omens, we also come across a puppet stand. Inside we find yet another note, telling us of the Lantern Specters, a new form of Lingered and one that I mentioned before. As Ray continues seeking answers and a way out, she eventually ends up in yet another room, finding beakers from the biology lab stuffed with horrifying looking puppets. And just a few steps forward, we see a daunting mass of puppets eerily hanging down, once again hinting at something ominous. But it's behind this mass of puppets that awaits us a furnace, one brimming with flames, and upon inspection we find that it's a spirit shrine, a place where people burn spirit money in order to earn blessings and good fortune. Though, as Ray retorts, it seems more like a deal with the devil than it does with spirits. As we continue to explore, we find more locked doors. And eventually we are led downstairs where we come across the unspeakable. And the deeper we venture, the more bodies we find, each locked in cells, their faces covered by bags. This place is a horror show. And oddly, it houses a demonic-looking incense burner. Again, something that looks less like a place to find peace and tranquility with the spirits, but rather something to make deals with devils who lurk beyond the shadows. And it's as we reach the end of the hall that we find our spirit money, ready to make our transaction. But it's also here where we find yet another locked door. Marking it for something later, we decide to head back to the stairwell, only to be met with more and more fear. Once we make it back to the furnace, we throw in our offering, asking for protection from the horrors around us. And as a gift, we receive a fan, something to give to the messengers of death at their door. But it's as we go to leave this accursed room that we find our prayers for protection have fallen upon deaf ears. Once Ray makes her escape, she ventures upstairs, searching for the other half of the door trinkets. She's met with yet another locked gate, this one being to the roof, as well as an even more decrepit and worn-down area of the school. Eventually, though, she stumbles into the projector room, and it's here that it leads her to the theater, where disturbing imagery is being displayed. And at the center of the room lies an unmarked grave, holding some incense for us to burn. And as we take it, the grave's identity is revealed. It's the grave of Wei, the guilt of our previous actions now thrown directly at our face. Ray makes her way back to the demonic incense pot and lights them, ushering in a metallic noise from across the room. And as she goes to investigate, she finds that that first cell has been open. And stuck in the body of its prisoner, the token we need to complete the door guarded by the messengers. Giving them their pair of offerings, their door swings open. And through them we find a courtyard. And in its center stands tall a copper statue, a monument of the president, a figure that looms high and can be seen across the school, a big brother who's always watching. The deeper we make our way through the story, the more it becomes clear what the themes really are. And while that might sound obvious, one of the biggest themes goes beyond just the political messages and the haunted, spooky ghost story stuff that we see on the surface. The game up to this point has been a constant stream of ritual sacrifice. From the blood of the innocent, to the food offerings to keep the lingered off our back, to the burning of spirit money and the offering of incense. It's all been a constant stream of sacrifice, and sacrifice that doesn't give an equivalent exchange either. Just crumbs to keep you alive. While all this gets more apparent as the game continues, one of the most important pieces of the puzzle is given to us in the theater here. If we look around a bit before taking the incense, we'll see that we can look at a poster right next to the national flag, and this poster reads, "Patriotism demands of us sustained sacrifice." What may appear as a simple slogan of metaphorical sacrifice to maintain national independence takes on a whole new meaning when the world around you demands it just to survive at the lowest level. And this only becomes more apparent when just across the room we can find the other half of the statement. "Leave your death in the hands of others." A slogan that no matter how you slice it has a menacing tone to it. And when paired with its other half and looked at in the order of how you would naturally read them, it says, "Leave your death in the hands of others. Patriotism demands of us sustained sacrifice." This sounds less like a traditional nationalist sentiment of making sacrifices for a strong nation, and rather reads as a justification to sacrifice your people in the name of sustained power. Or in other words, more meat for the grinder. Something reinforced when presented with the grave of Wei, a boy whose innocent blood was spilled in order for Ray just to survive. The Kuomintang took most of the damage in the Second Sino-Japanese War, going up against a militant and technologically superior empire. The communists convalesced in the mountain, growing stronger, growing popular, ready to strike when the moment was right. The Soviets, now in control of Manchuria, transferred the lands to the People's Liberation Army and provided captured Japanese material. For 3 years, China fell back into an all-out civil war. A rejuvenated PLA, indignant and scorned against fighting the wounded KMT. The Republic of China's army was pushed down south, back to the very Guangzhou that Dr. Sun led the National Revolution from. And on the 7th of December 1949, the Kuomintang was pushed out of mainland China and exiled to the recently captured island of Formosa. Taiwan, a former Japanese colony, was now faced with being managed by a blatantly corrupt Kuomintang government. Abuses by the Republic of China's army, seizure of property by government, would result in demonstrations by the local Taiwanese, demanding reform from the mainlander exiles. 2 years prior to the KMT's exile, the February 28 incident would kick off, and thousands would perish at the hands of the KMT. Disappearances, reprisal, execution. The Generalissimo did not intend on staying on the island of Taiwan for long. The priority, retaking the mainland, burned into his mind. On the 20th of May 1949, Chiang Kai-shek would usher in martial law, and for 38 years, every facet of Taiwanese society would be dedicated to the reclamation of the mainland. Lo and behold, the White Terror would grip Taiwan like a vice, and martial law would supersede human rights. Ray enters another room, what appears to be the counselor's office, though it's covered in talismans, and a familiar phone awaits for us at the desk. Like the rest of the school staff's offices up to this point, this room is particularly more tarnished and worse for wear than, well, most of the rest of the school. But this room does bear us a gift. A key to the roof, finally allowing us to progress further. However, from here on out, the school only becomes more active with its spiritual activity. The lantern-carrying giants begin to appear more frequently than they ever have before, and as we make our way back to the locked gate, we come across yet another door. This room holds a small theater of chairs and a beautiful grand piano. But at its center lies something ominous, a hanging cage holding a strange-looking puppet, a style Ray has never seen. The deeper we get into this side of the school, the more outwardly haunted it becomes, such as when we enter the intercom room and the walls are just this overgrown tree of human faces staring at us in agony. And the intercom itself is just an 8-track player. Though it is when we make it to the roof that we see more than just something haunting. While it is relatively empty up here, we do find a blood-soaked film. Anxiously, Ray takes it to the theater, nervously desiring to see just what it has to show us. And after we insert the film and make our way back to the projection room, we're given a code, a phone number. Upon dialing that number, we are met with some strange dialogue. And once again, we're left on the dial tone. And as this happens, a familiar figure pays us a visit. As the creature leaves, we exit the room, this time finding a mysteriously placed puppet by the door. It's a military policeman. And as we go to see more of the schoolyard that we have yet to explore, the walls around us begin to shift, looking less like that of an enclosed school, and more so that of a prison. At the end of the yard, we see a hanging figure above a chair, and two hands sticking out of the stage. This scene is a little too familiar. We place the military police on one of the hands. Missing the second puppet, we continue our search, only to find yet another familiar sight. A tree. And inside this tree lies an 8-track tape. When Ray takes it back to the intercom, she inputs it just to hear various patriotic pieces of music. It's fitting considering all the propaganda that we've been subjected to up to this point. Though it's on track 4 where we hear it. A string of notes. And if we go to the piano and have Ray play that same string of notes, the cage opens up. And we can take our newfound friend from their former abode and place it in the puppet theater. Yet another bad omen, and yet another key. Back down in the basement, we use this key to open that locked door we found earlier. And as we walk inside, a memory. Wei and Ray had already been acquainted, and their conversation points at a shared interest in pursuing knowledge, though it's from books that have been forbidden by the authorities. The deeper we trek through this hallway, the more we end up back in the past. This time, in Miss Yin's class. And this time, we find it. A bag containing a reading list. The only problem is, this isn't the kind of list we were expecting. And its description is a horrid sign of things to come. As we continue our journey, we eventually make it to a room of mirrors. And at the end, we find a familiar face. Miss Yin. Though her reflection is different, resembling the puppet that we took from its cage before, and the bodies that were locked in the basement. Miss Yin begins to berate us, accusing us of doing something terrible. Ray rejects any idea of this. That is until Miss Yin reminds us of a harmless piece of paper, and how because of us, she and her students had to die. It's at this point that Ray begins to crack, no longer denying anything, simply accusing Miss Yin back of driving her insane. And as the argument hits its apex, Ray crumbles in her guilt, though her reflection does what she is too afraid to do herself. Attempting to walk past the trauma she just experienced, Ray enters a temple. Coming face to face with Justice Chiang. While in her eyes, prayers to him are useless, she still decides to give it a chance. Asking about her prospects. Asking about her love. And lastly, she asks about her family. Each prayer ending in a pessimistic lament. By this point, I think it's clear what this game is truly about. It's more than just an experience about a haunted school or a damsel in distress. Rather, Detention is a game about Taiwan, and more specifically, the societal oppressions it faced during the period known as the White Terror, a period defined by its brutality and totalitarian overreach, as well as the deep seeds of paranoia planted in the people who had to grow up during that time. This is where the parallels to 1984 and Fahrenheit 451 come in. Taiwan, or the Republic of China during this time period, was a police state. There's no other way of saying it. It was a country oppressed by military rule and martial law, and it was a place where simply being accused of sympathizing with the so-called enemy could end with a death sentence. And like any society that is ruled by fear or an iron law, where the barrier of justice is met with a low bar of evidence, all it takes is a push for that house of cards to crumble and for the people to become their own worst enemies. Always afraid of who might be watching, who you might know that might be breaking the rules, and how their downfall and actions could possibly drag you in. This is the type of fear and paranoia that causes rational and compassionate people to eat each other, and the type of hell that countless authors and artists have tried to warn us about. And As spoken about in the previous history section, all of this stems from the scars of China's struggle to rise past its revolution from the Manchurians, and the torment that it suffered under the occupation of the Japanese Empire. And while we all have our own little ideas of what oppression and dystopia means, for most, I think it's safe to say it pales in comparison to the reality of what it's been in the past. Following the February 28th incident, Taiwan, now the Republic of China, would fall under the iron rule of Chiang Kai-shek. The typical human rights abuses expected from any authoritarian regime were bountiful, but the newly formed Taiwan Garrison Command, a secret police force built to snuff out opposition and to find and crush any dissidents, all hope of reform became nothing but a sick joke. Chiang would push his Chinese troops to marry the indigenous Taiwanese, and through family creation, his goal would be to transform Taiwan into his own vision of the true China. The Taiwanese wives are no longer permitted to cook traditional Taiwanese meals, and their own native tongue would be stripped from the people entirely, forced to adopt Mandarin as their new home language. Children who decided to speak their land's native tongue would be forced to wear signs and shamed by the public. And as time passed, the use of martial law would only increase in its intensity. During the 50s, many conscripts and raids would take place on schools. Countless teachers and education officials would be executed for the accusation of spreading contraband books or false information. And during the 1960s, attempts to create a democratic party would result in the creators being arrested and imprisoned. Things would only continue on in the 70s, where various writers would be framed for being communist sympathizers and imprisoned, all for supporting the simple idea of independence. And throughout all of this, the effects of all the raids, of the death, of the camps, of the prisons, the people of Taiwan would grow more and more paranoid. Who was a loyalist and who was a conspiring enemy? Who was a dissident? Was it your brother, your friend, your child's teacher, or was it even your wife? This paranoia would only fester as the White Terror went on, and the blood of the innocent would continue to spill. More meat for the grinder, and more sacrifice for the nation. Walking through an empty hallway, Ray slowly approaches a light, the dim red glow of a shrine. Next to it sits a radio, and it's through this radio that we finally get to learn of her past. As we adjust the dial to secure a signal, we hear some old music. And once we hit the right frequency, we find ourselves back in Ray's bedroom. It's a calm and warm place, despite the creepy and uncanny looking piggy bank. Here, Ray enters the main room of her family home. In the kitchen, we see her parents, her mother crying silently, and her father sitting across the table, stewing in a quiet depression as he's trapped in his thoughts. Ray speaks of the sorrow that she feels while watching her family fall apart, breaking beyond any sort of repair. And as she continues to look through the house, she ends up walking into a picture room. Portraits of her family, each flipped in strange ways. It's confusing until she turns out the light. Her parents' portraits are both crossed out, and her own picture sheds a never-ending stream of tears. She fills up a glass with them. a beautiful glass of pure sadness. And when she goes to return to the radio, she finds that her parents are gone, and her home has fallen into disrepair, a reflection of the family who resides in it. As Ray returns to the dial, she flips to the next frequency. And is once again brought back to her room. The piggy bank here is now broken, and her house is upside down. When she walks back out this time, she ends up in a hallway and is met with a maze of doors. Using her cup of sadness, she's able to find the path needed to progress forward. And when she does, she's met with an even creepier hallway. At its center is an ad for a private investigator. And when we enter the door alongside it, we find both of her parents asleep in bed. Despite laying together in their family home, there's no love left in this marriage. It's something that deeply hurts Ray as she reminisces on it. But it's as she enters the adjoined room that she finds 3 clocks. If we use the positions from the family portraits we found from before, the clock in the middle fills with blood. And as we exit the room, Ray's mother is missing. In her place, the laundry of various women all across the room. Obvious signs of her father's infidelity. Ray's mother can be heard crying somewhere off screen. And it's a reminder that this is just another nail in her family's coffin. Ray then progresses to the end of the hall, and somehow the door leads to the counselor's office. Only here the room is actually clean. Still empty, but not rotten and destroyed like it was before. In a search for answers, Ray goes back in time. The portrait room now dark and red. And what once looked like a door that was dark and disgusting, it now sits contrasting with the rest of the room in blue and purple. And as Ray walks through it, we finally meet him. The counselor whose office we've been to countless times by this point and still never met. He speaks to us kindly but with authority, calling us beautiful yet vain, like that of a daffodil. Our counselor speaks about his views on Taiwan, how horrible things have happened, as well as of his time abroad, reminiscing on how before the country wasn't so oppressive. But in these trying times they're in, they should still chase freedom. The counselor invites Ray to the boulevard to discuss things that aren't written about in the school's censored texts. With that, Ray makes her way even further into the future this time. Though, when she leaves her room here, she's met with a distorted hallway of mirrors and a figure stalking in her reflection, following her to each destination. And when she reaches it, it's revealed to be her father's study, a place Ray fondly thinks of as she reflects on her father, stealing a coin from his coat after buying a ticket. She makes her way to the cinema, and the world around her, for once, becomes colorful. It's nonsensical but wondrous. The only place we've seen where color and whimsy reign supreme. Entering the theater, Ray meets with her counselor. But it's not books or knowledge that they speak about. Rather, no words could describe the subtle horror of what's actually being presented here. Though when the film ends, the world returns to its ashen gray, to its decrepit reality. And upon returning home, Ray sees what's happened to her father. Arrested after a search warrant was filed, likely due to the private investigator. And if the note hints at anything, it was her own mother who reported him, likely as revenge for his infidelity. Her family now fully destroyed, all Ray has is her counselor, which she intends to see as her assignment book suggests. Though when she returns to his office, it's now a bleak nightmare. Contrasting the beauty that we just saw, and his words are dismissive at best, letting Ray know that their time is coming to an end. The end is nigh as Ray leaves her memories behind, and she is now confronted by the truth of her life. Seeing apparitions of herself, each giving deep insights into the depression, betrayal, and anguish that she feels. Her family was broken, and her heart shattered. It all eats her away as the days pass, and resolving in her anger, she leaves her house one final time. Though as she does, we get a glimpse through the eyes of someone else. At the door is Miss Yin, shouting at what seems to be Ray's counselor, shaming him for going after a child, for abusing his place and simply setting her on the right path and seeking knowledge and freedom, and instead using her as an opportunity to wrap his arms around somebody younger. He dismisses Miss Yin's words, a decision that seals his fate. And once again, Ray awakes in the theater. Only now it's even more destroyed than before. In the place where this all began, Ray meets her shadow, where she contemplates her life and her actions, stuck in this perpetual state of guilt and regret. And as she treks through the school one final time, we finally bear witness to the full truth. Ray found out about Miss Yin's book club, where Wei and other students would read books banned by the state. Though the shipping company they worked with could no longer get the books they needed, and time was coming to an end for the book club anyway, with conditions only getting worse. And after this flashback, Ray finds a note. A newspaper clipping explaining Miss Yin's true identity. A fugitive who traveled the world fighting for human rights, doing whatever she could to help others escape the chains of oppression. Though in the end she had to flee Taiwan, evading arrest for her crimes of empowering others. And as we trek a little deeper in, another vision of the past plays through, seemingly the aftermath of the bad situation. Wei and another student are burning the books they once held so dear, attempting to erase any evidence of their associations with the book club. And once again, after witnessing this memory, Ray finds another note. This time, a court verdict. Her counselor and forbidden lover will be put to death for his collusion with communist forces, and Wei and the other students sentenced to 15 years in prison. And now that Ray fully remembers her past and sees it for what it is, her guilt becomes apparent. But that begs the question. Just what did Ray do to cause her fellow students to face prison time, and her teacher to flee the country, and her counselor to end up dead? Back at the tree, where this entire game started, we see it. Ray approaches the instructor, the feared instructor Bai, handing the officer a paper, the reading list of the book club. His only reply was a cold one, but a simple sentence said everything. Miss Fang, the country appreciates your assistance. And with that, the fates of all those around her were set in stone. Accepting her guilt and the role that she played in what happened, Ray finally finds her way out. Back in the counselor's office, we see one final memory. Where Ray and him speak. While he laments his own mistakes, he accepts his fate. And he tells her that the world is not ready for people like them just yet. And that they are the daffodils.
白水先染上一河鲜血，只能如铁锈般凋零。
Detention is a heavy game. Its story is both self-explanatory and impossible to fully understand without the history behind its world. This game is just another game about a girl trapped in a Silent Hill-esque world, or just a history tale of Taiwan and its oppressive years into the White Terror. What it is something far more significant. It's a game about humanity. A game about people struggling to survive in an oppressive and evil world, where ideas can be treason and curiosity can be a death sentence. Ray is not the villain of the story despite the tragedy that came from her actions. Rather, she herself is just another victim. Another person caught in the crossfire of a war that she had nothing to do with, where society around her was trapped by an iron vice, and everyone suffered, even if it was all in silence. The authority of her government led to her family's demise, and the authority of her counselor, the man who was supposed to be there to guide her through things as she grew up, as well as the unofficial guide to help her find freedom through knowledge, abused his own authority to explore his perverted romance, twisted a broken girl's emotions further, and shattered her heart when he threw her away. The White Terror as a whole is a tragedy that allowed for such a power structure to exist, a chain wrapped around the necks of all who lived under it, creating the paranoia needed to allow for anyone who wanted to abuse their power to do so, regardless if they were an official in power, dictating who lives and dies simply for what they say or what they read, or for those who took authority in their own hands, who found themselves in places of underground leadership, only to take advantage of the people who flocked to them in order to seek their guidance to true freedom, and to escape the chains of repression and oppression that they were already under. Detention is a reflection of Taiwanese history, specifically a period of time itself. painting a clear and vivid picture of suffering that came from one of the most tragic points in human history. So I guess the best way I can end this video is to leave you with one final point. And that point is this: even if the world is covered in ash, be brave enough to stand as a daffodil. Now, before we go, this is my wall of shame. The people who give me their money at least once a month in exchange for some mediocre content like you just watched. And all jokes aside, my biggest and grandest of thank yous to everyone who supports. It means the world to me, and projects like this about kind of not that popular of games going into fucking Chinese history of all things is not something that typically, I could do if I was just going for blatant popularity. So for all you crazy motherfuckers who want to see this stuff and really want me to talk about all this, again, thank you. And I want to continue to make more interesting content and just more and more stuff. I got plenty more content coming down the pipeline. I know that I've kind of put stuff out back to back to back, but that's been kind of one of my goals this year, is to put out more content than I did last year. Since that was the first one I really kind of slowed down on, I still got a good chunk of stuff out, but not as much as I would like. So look forward to plenty more videos this year and hopefully the coming next few years. Anyway, thanks for watching, and thank you for support. If you want to become a patron and you want to support my fat ass, well, my Patreon and coffee are in the description. But with that, I bid you adieu. Subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you in the next video.